Irris, Memorial Day, of course, always somber in Israel. Tell us, though, particularly what the mood is like this year, given the war.
It's always somber, but this year is completely different. There's a lack. I was reading someone saying Memorial Day is a time of memory, but Israel isn't in memory. It's actually in the event. There's no looking back. It's still ongoing. There are still hostages being held in Gaza. There are still Israeli soldiers fighting in Gaza. There are still people displaced from their homes in southern Israel and in the north. And there are still Palestinians being killed in Gaza. So it's not an event of memory. It's an event of the present. And in the present, you want hope. And what you're actually seeing is quite a bit of division, because we have seen that in some places where Israeli ministers, usually politicians, come to these services, they're held not just in Jerusalem, around the country. And the controversial minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, many people didn't want to hear from him at their ceremony. So they actually had to build a barrier in the middle of the place in Ashdod where that memorial service is being held, so that he would be separated from the families, the mourning families who are remembering their dead. So you can see from that how very fractious it is. And then tonight, when Independence Day begins, that's also always described as a difficult transition from memory to the present. Well, that's also something that's very complicated this year. You know, I spoke to an Australian woman I know who lives in Israel. It was her birthday yesterday. She's from the south of the country. She's no longer living in her home. So her birthday is complicated for her. She knows hostages who are still being held in Gaza from her kibbutz. Everything is complicated. The National Day is complicated, and her personal day is complicated. So I think this is one of the saddest celebrations of Israeli independence since 1948, since the creation of the State of Israel. And it's because of all this very complicated war, which, this forever war that doesn't end. And we're seeing two celebrations tonight, by the way, Nadia. One, the formal celebration, which is usually live, but is not live in case people will be protesting against it. And then another that the families of the hostages are holding, quite a different tone. So very complicated here.
Irris Makler, live in Jerusalem. Thanks very much. Well, ahead of that tribute yesterday evening, as Irris was saying, tens of thousands of Israelis attended ceremonies to remember victims as well. Now, at the same time yesterday, a smaller group of Israelis attended an alternative event online. It was a joint memorial with Palestinian victims. It was organised by bereaved families and the organisation Combatants For Peace. And I'm pleased now to say that the co-directors of that organisation, Eszter Koranyi, who's Israeli, and Rana Salman, who's Palestinian, both join me live now. Welcome to you both. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you for having us.
Hi.
Esther,
welcome.
If I could start with
Thank you.
What makes your joint memorial unusual, as I understand it, is that it recognises Palestinian loss on a day that is really normally focused in Israel just on Israeli victims. So tell us about this ceremony yesterday and the kind of reaction it got from fellow Israelis.
Yeah, so our ceremony is special because we bring a voice of peace. We say that this conflict lost enough innocent lives, and we have to remember them together to show the world that a different future is possible. And through our cooperation, Israelis and Palestinians, even in the middle of the war, we can come together and mourn together and wish for a peaceful life. And obviously, it's very controversial, but I also heard a lot of voices who say that this event is the only one that can actually make them pass through this very, very difficult day with some kind of hope and some kind of love towards humanity in their hearts.
And Rana, same question to you then. Eszter talked about this being a controversial memorial. It's been held for nearly 20 years now. As a Palestinian, how did you view this year's event in particular?
Very significant to hold actually the joint memorial ceremony this year because of the painful reality that we have been going through since October 7th and the ongoing war that is happening on Gaza. And it gives us an opportunity to actually come together and call for an end to the violence and demand a political solution that brings freedom, justice, and safety for all.
Can you give us an insight, Rana, into how Palestinians that you know, Palestinians that you work with, perhaps your family, feel about the kind of work that you're doing, this memorial that you held yesterday with Israeli victims? What kind of reaction did you get to
that? Thankfully, my family supports the work that I do because we believe that, as Esther mentioned, another future is possible and we can end this cycle of violence. And through coming together to share our pain and our sorrow, it's actually we're building hope for a better future. And this is the first step to recognize each other as human beings and to recognize the other's pain and sorrow and grief and come together to demand an end for this violence for the sake of our children from both sides.
And Esther, I read that the joint memorial that you held last year had around 15,000 people in person, something like 20,000 people online. That was more than the year before. I don't know if you have the figures for yesterday's event yet, but do you have a sense as to, I don't know, how much support it had within Israel? As you mentioned yourself, it remains a very controversial idea to mourn with Palestinians.
Yeah, we don't have the final figures yet, but it's definitely a couple of 10,000 of people who watched it online, and we will have the final figures like about in a day, so we will announce them. And also we had about 200 viewing events in Israel and in the world, even in, let's say, Los Angeles or Berlin, where there are also a lot of demonstrations. Because of the war, people managed to find places where they could hold a viewing event, and the same happened also in Israel in a lot of venues. So we had thousands of people, no matter what, gathering physically and watching the event live or broadcasted live yesterday, and also had a conversation afterwards. So we are very happy about that. And also Ynet, which is one of the biggest online newspapers, they had a big article on the main site. So when you open in the app or in the internet, the second article which came up was about the ceremony, and actually it was in favor of it. So that means that even though it's controversial, it's very, very important. It has a universal message that even mainstream Israeli media is broadcasting to their readers and to their viewers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm interested, though, Rana, about perhaps the challenges that you may have found this year in hearing Palestinian voices. I know normally this event is held in person. Palestinians from the West Bank were unable to travel to Israel this year because of restrictions in place since October the 7th. Was it hard as well to get voices out of Gaza?
Not really, because one of our Palestinian speakers, actually our activist Ahmed Al-Hilo, his family is originally from Gaza and his wife's family is originally from Gaza. So it was very important for us also to bring that voice about the loss of loved ones from Gaza and the people who are still missing or under the rubble. It was very important to bring this voice to the memorial ceremony because it's important to see the other and the pain of the other in this on this day, especially because the war is still ongoing and it's not over yet, and both societies are traumatized by all the violence that has been happening over the years, not only through October 7th.
And look, the message that both of you have as Israelis and Palestinians is pretty rare within both of your communities. And I'd love to hear from both of you personally, what is it that motivated you to get involved with peace activism beyond the Memorial Day itself, but just why did you get involved with Combatants for Peace? Why is this something that you're fighting for? I think it would help us to sort of humanize the stories a bit. Esther, perhaps we can hear from you first.
Yeah, so my story, I'm not an ex-combatant. I was born and raised in Hungary, and when I understood that because of family reasons. My husband is Israeli. I'm staying in this country. I felt that I cannot accept that Israel is only opening its gates towards Jews like I am. Even though I was born in another country, I can come here and have full rights immediately. And there are other people here that live here for generations and don't have equal rights. So I said, okay, I'm accepting that I can live in this country because that's where life brought me. On the other hand, I gave myself a promise that I will find a place where I can work so that this place is going to be equally a home, a safe and welcoming home for everyone who wants to live here. And it will not be divided because of religion or national belonging. It's also a message that I received from my two grandmothers who are Holocaust survivors, and I had the big luck to meet them and know them also as an adult person. And their universal message of just loving humankind really somehow made me to go on this path. And then when I settled in Jerusalem, I met Combatants For Peace, and I immediately really liked the people and the message and the very unique combination of the peace work we do. So I had the luck to join, and that was nearly 7 years ago, and I'm still here.
And Rana, same question to you then. How did you come to join a movement like this? What was it that motivated you personally?
So as Esther mentioned, I'm also not an ex-combatant. I don't share the same background as our co-founders who started and founded this movement back in 2006. But because today the movement is more open and more inclusive to ex-combatant, non-violent activists, to women, to young people.
Rana, I'm going to cut across you. We're having some connection. Maybe we can hear you a little better now. Do continue, Rana. We're having some problems with the line, but I want to make sure your message comes across. Go ahead.
So I said that I don't have the same background as our co-founders. I'm also not an ex-combatant, just like Esther. But everybody who believes in the values of non-violence and our shared humanity can be part of the movement. I joined the movement about 4 years ago. And one of the reasons that I'm still here, because every time I'm among our joint community, it just gives me hope for a better future, because I believe our activists embody the future that we are seeking to bring about. And it's not impossible. If we can do it on a smaller scale, we believe we can do a big change to the reality that we're living in on a much larger scale.
It's really good to hear from both of you. Thank you very much indeed. Rana Salman talking to us there live from Bethlehem, and Eszter Koranyi as well. She was live in Jerusalem. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.